On this week's episode of the Crowdfunding Nerds, we discuss understanding the risks of business with poker analogies, preparing for unforeseen circumstances, the importance of diligent planning, and a tariff update. Let's get into it. Hey folks, this episode is brought to you by Hero Time Manufacturing. That is Hero Time, the numeral1.com. Hirsch Gleck has been a regular on our podcast. We highly recommend his services. He is a man of integrity. Hero Time, they can make anything. They've got competitive pricing, and they even do game prototypes. So make sure to check out Hero Time, numeral1.com. A link is in the show notes. And if you use the code crowdfundingnerds101, you can get a 3% discount on your production through them. Let's get back into the episode.
Game begin.
Let's go.
Go back to the shadow. You shall not fail. Crowdfunding Nerds.
Amazing.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I am joined as always by Sean, and Ryan is back. Ryan Williams is back to join us on an episode where we talk about opportunity and luck. So we had this really awesome conversation. Sean, you can kind of expand on this more later, where we talked with a guy who has a ridiculous amount of experience in the games industry, making video games. And he has like a ton of projects that are on the shelf that he's trying to pitch to studios so that they pick up these AAA titles and whatnot that he has made with his development team. And he gave it some just some really insightful, like, we asked like what how do you boil down your methodology for success? And he basically said skill, hard work, and luck are the three things. So we wanted to have a conversation where we really started to like drill deeper into that because it was very fascinating. And then we also wanted to take a pit stop at tariffs again because there's news. So before we get into tariff stuff, which is spicy, Sean, you wanna start us off and like just kind of explain who it was and what conversation we had and that kind of thing. And you, by the way, you guys will hear this in an upcoming episode, our interview.
Yeah, sure. So we interviewed Bob Raffy, and he was the first employee of a studio called Naughty Dog, which produced Crash Bandicoot, the Jack and Dexter series, Uncharted, so on and so forth. And yeah, he was just telling us about his development studio, which so he's branched off now, done his own thing through a company that he founded called Big Red Button. And yeah, to be honest, we could probably have him back on at some stage. I think he'd be open to that. So this is an episode that you'll hear next week when we release it. But yeah, I think one thing that maybe stuck out to us was his approach to game development. And as an entrepreneur, he very much is aware that there are factors outside of your control which can make or break your company or your game. And I think it's relevant to the taxes, the tariff situation here, because no one could foresee that. And if you were caught at the wrong place at the wrong time, then that could have tanked your business, tanked your company. So I think we kind of want to set up this conversation as something that this is the game you're playing. There's going to be things, even if you do everything right, there's going to be things that you cannot control. And maybe just a reminder that, the world, the universe, reality doesn't owe you success. And this is just the kind of world you're in, where you can do your best and sometimes still fail because there's things completely outside of your control that can govern that. But I think the reverse is also true, where things can change for the worst very quickly, but things can also change for the better very quickly. So this is kind of where we are. So I think it was just good to have a conversation around that.
I'm reminded of a ship on the ocean versus me on the beach looking at the ocean. On the beach, I can say, wow, it looks so beautiful, even though there are storm clouds down, at the furthest end spot that I can see on the ocean. But then the ship could be going through a storm where there are, 50-foot wave swells, and they're, unable to travel in a straight line because the storm is so bad. They're probably not thinking about how beautiful the ocean is. And it depends on your perspective, is really a lot of the time based on the placement. And if you place yourself in a riskier location, you stand to gain more and lose more. generally, right? In business, because that's what we're talking about. We're all, all the people listening to this are running a crowdfunding business or running a business that crowdfunding is an integral part of the initial, burst of funding or whatever. And you are you're in risky waters when you're making something. But, if you're out here, all your friends that don't run businesses, that are just, working at Starbucks or whatever, it's a much less risky position for them, because they're earning a wage, and looking at crowdfunding as something that looks cool, looks fun, it looks interesting. But then here you are with 50-foot swells up and down, and just trying to survive in the middle of this crowdfunding ocean. And Ryan, you were just there. Let's talk about what kind of swells did you experience?
Oh yeah, for sure. I definitely was riding that out in like a little dinghy, and had my oar out and was just paddling against the waves. But yeah, I mean that definitely. I mean, I kind of felt like I got hit on all sides. At first, I was looking at a 20-30% around that ballpark tariff when the whole situation kind of broke. And I already had postponed my launch and named my final date. And it was like, I'm not, you reach a point of where you just have to commit and you have to launch, because if you keep on postponing, you look like a noob, and maybe you actually are. And you just start to lose trust with, your constituency of followers, and you don't want to just keep on saying, no, this time for real. And then they're all like, yes, okay, on Tuesday morning, I'm hopping on 8 a.m. and I'm gonna get that first backer count, as the first backer and be number one. And then it's like, oh, never mind, sorry, we're delaying again. So I was just like, well, okay, so there's like this 20-30% tariff thing. At that time, that was way before, it ever escalated to like 150, or some people, there was like a lot of misinformation floating around, like it's actually 250, but that actually only applied to like some like rare earth minerals and pharmaceutical stuff, or some particular things. But 150 is still, nothing to wake a stick at. It's super bad. And so even before that, there was the 20-30% thing I was facing. And I was just like, okay, I can't change that. It's something that has happened, and I've got to course correct and look at my numbers and see, what I can do to adjust for that. Whether that is looking at manufacturing in Vietnam, or if it's slightly adjusting shipping costs, or looking at the margins and seeing how much I can absorb. This is the kind of stuff that you, instead of just kind of, there is that, I felt the temptation. Trust me, like I feel the anxiety. It's, I'm dealing with it on the front line, so to speak, and it's impacting me in the now. But it's like I can't just get shell shock and curl up in a ball. It's like, what are some actual actionable things that I can do to guide myself through this, storm at sea, since we're using this visual analogy? It's like, okay, there's no swells, there's no gales, everything's calm, and then the sea is really capricious. And I've been on, not the sea so much, I have been when it was crazy, but mostly a large lake, that would just, the wind would kick up to like gale force, like 35 mile an hour winds, and you'd get 3-foot swells and white caps out of nowhere. And I worked for a boat rental company that my family owned, and I'd go out on jet skis and rescue people. And it would be like totally fine one moment, and then suddenly, people are like taking on water in their Bayliner or whatever, and I'd have to like go out there and just, mob over these waves. I'm doing like, I used to race motocross, so I was like used to riding a dirt bike, and it was a lot like that. You're just like, riding a motorcycle on the dirt, and you're like doing triples and doubles. It was like jumping all these waves and getting over to them. Anyway, so I know how things can change really quickly in life, and it's like, there's fear, and there's a timidity where you just kind of want to seize up, or even just in the shock of it all. But it's like, well, there's a boat sinking out there. You can either save it or just let it bang against the rocks. And so, if you're actionable, you can go out there and with some courage and do something about it. So yeah, I found out that Longpack had wrote me a letter because thankfully they were my former manufacturer of my previous product, my other crowdfunded board game, Backwoods. And, so they wrote me and said that they had positioned themselves in Vietnam for going on 3 years now. So they had the foresight kind of from previously when tariffs had first kind of arisen to start having a legitimate foothold and station, so to speak, in Vietnam, so that they could, manufacture there to navigate as an alternative. So I kind of, just went with that with my relaunch, which you may have heard, the issues that caused me to have to relaunch in previous episodes. But I was just leaning into it. It's kind of leaning into the wave, so to speak. Like I've seen a ton of footage of like these huge vessels at seas. It's just fascinating to me. Like, what do you do when there's, like the Coast Guard is navigating and you just can't dodge a wave? Like, the first thing is you just hope to dodge like the crazy wave that's coming and you see it forming, but sometimes you can't. And they just like cut through it like a knife head on, if you can't avoid it. And so that's pretty much what I did. I was just like, I'm gonna put that on my campaign image. I'm just gonna say, no tariffs will be suffered from my backers. I pretty much just said no tariffs made in Vietnam. On it's like some icons on my campaign page. I have a section on it, down into my shipping, explaining it, showing a letter from Longpack, so that people knew it was real. And so yeah, I mean, there was stuff like that, and then StarCraft, like teamed up with Archon Studios. My game was Star Clash, obviously an homage to StarCraft. I played that game for 25 years on PC, and I never played the original StarCraft board game or anything Archon's made, but I was just like, I want to make a StarCraft like game that's an homage to the PC experience and more like it felt like a true translation of what it felt like when you're playing on PC, not kind of zoomed out like the StarCraft board game's cool, but it's like really zoomed out, or it's just like you're taking over entire planets, and the way movement or combat works is not akin to the PC game. So I was like, I'm going to do something like that. Nobody's been doing a StarCraft game for like 20 years. Wouldn't that be cool? And then, right in the middle of my campaign, Archon makes a big announcement like, we're going to be doing StarCraft tabletop miniatures game, and then later, StarCraft board game. And I was like, oh man, we got like that and tariffs happening, and it was a lot. And I could have just buckled and decided not to relaunch or canceled the second time or whatever, but I didn't. And I'm glad I didn't. I ended up just about 300% overfunded, and the campaign just ended a few days ago.
Hey, crowdfunding nerds, if you're looking for an awesome fulfillment partner for US shipping, you should really consider Bridge Distribution and Fulfillment. I personally use them. I've used them for multiple projects. They do such a great job. They also can fulfill Amazon orders and get you prepped for Amazon and their warehousing team. I have been so happy using Bridge Distribution. I'm really proud that they're sponsoring us. If you reach out, bridgedist.com, that's bridgedist.com, let them know we sent you. All right, now back to the show. Yeah, it's a lot of, I guess, stormy seas, in the proverbial sense. You went through a lot. You went through some personal challenges. You went through a crazy company announcement that ended up, being a causing competition for you, and that was unforeseen. And then tariffs, all three negative things, but you still ended up getting funded, which is awesome. So that the kind of crux of the episode is all about how. So if I were to, kind of the reason that I wanted to get on and record is as much about how to control your luck as much as possible. It just seems like certain companies are always getting lucky. If we want to phrase it like that. And I heard that, this adage is that when opportunity meets preparedness, it creates good luck. So if you're doing the right things and I think the elements are really your personal skill, the amount of hard work you're putting in, if you have a great idea or how great your idea is, how solid the implementation of your idea is, all of those things contribute to good luck. And I think that in this way, you can kind of have agency over what happens to a degree. But there's something that it's kind of I guess your risk tolerance is another aspect of luck, where if you have a high risk tolerance, you put yourself in a risky situation, bad luck can capsize you and just make you sink in a very high risk situation if the thing that you're risking goes wrong. But if it goes well, you put yourself in a high risk situation. Oftentimes, it is equated with high reward. So I think that the very first probably element of this is stability. Are you, as a company or as a person, like what happens? Like if this campaign fails, is it a big problem or is it something you can deal with or whatever? And I guess to stop beating around the bush, like, do you have another source of income that you can rely on? And that's, I think, probably the number one thing that in a lot of cases where, for me, working on Deliverance, Council of the Fallen, we funded 505,000 and we're now closing in on about 700,000 in total funding with the pledge manager. And I am, one very, very big and important thing is that I don't pull a wage from Deliverance, Council of the Fallen, because I don't need to. I have my wage comes from this company, right? Or this is my primary profession. And, I'm a marketing nerd. And so I have this board game that that if I needed to draw a wage from that, I would then be much more impacted by tariffs because the disposable, I guess we'll call it the disposable income of the project. I have chosen to invest into, low end games and future projects and whatnot. Um, so that we can get further along and do bigger, more awesome things and whatnot. But when tariffs hit, it's like, well, this isn't good for me. Certainly 145% tariff was something that would have not allowed me to deliver the project unless I charged more money for it to the US. But now it's 30%. And I can deliver, but even that 30%, that is a significant amount of money that is going to be taken out of my company. Whereas it would be, let's say if it was 6 months ago, it would be at 0%. And so, about $5 a game, or it's like $4.50 a game or so, is what that 30% represents in added expense to me. So it's not something that capsizes me, but I didn't put myself in a position where I was risking everything because I needed to make a certain amount of money. I have 7 children. Like I have expenses. I have my house and my household, is an expensive thing and it needs to be, my children need to be fed and clothed and all of that. So if I were to have just quit everything, that represents much too high of a risk for me. I'm not willing to take a risk like that. Also, I think it's stupid because I, would be abandoning one business to start another. I don't know. But the point is that if you're working a regular 9 to 5, or you have an alternative form, you're freelancing or whatever, this enables you, it gives you more agency over things like tariffs, where it doesn't mean that you no longer get to eat. For some companies, it kind of did, right? It does, right? That, there are several companies that closed. Interestingly enough, none of the companies that I've seen close, like one that I remember, Boardlandia Online, and then there's it was am I crazy? Greater Than Game, not Greater Than Games. The company that produces Spirit Island. All of their design team got let go. All everybody, but they're going to continue to sell the current products, but they're not designing any new products right now. And then Simon let all of their development staff go. Everyone that's working on new projects was just let go because they had to focus on fulfilling old projects, and so they cut all of their designers, all their developers, and they had like 2 teams, like one in Brazil and one in somewhere else. I don't know, but that was like those are
Final Frontier games as well.
yes, Final Frontier games. But a lot of these companies that went out of business, every one of them cited additional factors that had been plaguing them, and then these tariffs were like the last nail in the coffin. So that is one thing that I found was common with all of them. There were others that could have seen a significant damage. Actually, if you one thing that I learned since is all the 145% tariffs, I learned that books were exempt. Books were exempt from all tariffs, and so RPG books made in China are exempt from tariffs because they're books. If companies like Modifius or Magpie that make our RPG books, if they were to have made them in China, they kind of made it through anything that required plastics, like Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons, like all their core books were fine. I think they estimated about $10 million in tariff costs, which is actually extremely low for a company like that. They were doing super duper well and with their sales of Dungeons and Dragons, and because a lot of that is either exempt or not. But the $10 million in tariffs costs that they estimated was from their like D&D, I want to say like miniature sets or something having to do with plastics that were produced in China that had to be shipped over, that caused like box sets is what they're called, the D&D box sets, because those were produced in China and not just books, so they couldn't be exempt. So anyway, that's it's just something I observed. But the point that I wanted to kind of get across is that your risk tolerance will lead you to either put yourself in a position of safety or a very aggressive position where you stand to gain more and also lose more. And I think that the mistake that people make a lot of the time is they don't adequately, I guess, assess the risks. They're like, I'm going to put myself into the position of greatest potential gain. And they don't think, what if something bad happens that I'm not prepared for? So this is something that you kind of listening to this, you're like, I'm sure that you want to put everything into your own personal projects or what you're passionate about. But, it's oftentimes you should not place your physiological safety or your needs like food and food, shelter, clothing ahead of that. And if you don't realize that that's what you're doing by quitting your job and living off of your nest egg in your parents' basement while making this game, you might not end up ahead at all. So I know. Yeah. What do you think about that, Sean?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's all baby steps, if you're possible. But I think one thing about Ryan's story that I think people can learn from is that Ryan you didn't give up. You had all this kind of negativity, all these kind of hurdles that kept on popping up, but you retweet and relaunched and were successful. So I think there's just like a little kind of testimony here of just being resilient and persistent. And as you were saying, this idea of I like the word luck. I don't tend to believe in luck. I think things happen for a reason. I think your job in life is to try to figure out why that is and learn from it.
The Bible calls it chance. Time and chance happen to them all, right?
Yeah, but even the die is cast into the lot. And anyway, yeah, I think it's like a two-edged sword, right? Because there's an element where it's like, oh, if I work hard enough, then I'm just going to give myself the best possibility. But there's also an element that you can work really hard and things still fall flat on its face, right? So it's like you got to be careful of. And there's this movement. I think it's called the Red Pill movement, and it's kind of like bravado. And a lot of people are like, oh, everyone who's poor is just lazy. You just have to work harder. Actually, that's like the that's like kind of the testimony of slaves. You know, it's like, oh well, you know, if you just work harder, little slave, then you'll be able to increase. And I think you got to be careful with that mentality, because there's a truth to that. That yes, diligence generally produces better results, and working hard is important, but it doesn't necessarily correlate with success all the time. And I think as a business owner, you have to recognize that you could do everything right, you could still fail, and that is something that, as someone who's playing the game, so to speak, has to be prepared for. You have to be prepared for the possibility of losing and suffering greatly. And I think, as you said, it's about taking those baby steps to minimize those possibilities. We do the same thing with ad spend. You know, a lot of people say, how much should we spend with ads? I'm like, our answer is pretty much always the same. Let's start small. Let's start with $20 a day and just see where that goes. And then let's gradually increase it each day. And can we maintain results? Can we scale accordingly? Because when you do hit the ceiling, well, then if you're scaling $20 a day, well, then you're going to hit it pretty quickly. You're going to find out, okay, this is where we are. Or also, if you scale to 5,000 a day, and then it's like, oh goodness, what's happening? You have to scale it back to 1,000, and that's still not working. You've just kind of thrown away all this money. So that's just an example of how
Very
meta works.
expensive lesson to learn at that point, right? I think that as a former, so I was a semi-professional poker player. I would track a bankroll. I played online, and I played 10 tables at the same time on Full Tilt Poker and PokerStars.net, and like back before that got kind of suspended by the U.S. government for a while, and it was just alongside what I was currently doing. But it was nice to get $700 or so, the extra for spending money or whatever. And what I found was very, very important was to minimize your losses and maximize your gains. So if I were to lose, I want to try to lose as a little amount as possible. So for example, like if I have a somewhat decent hand, I don't know, let's just say pocket tens. I have a pair of tens in my hand, and then I bet, and somebody goes all in, and let's just say the pot had $1 in it, and then I bet, and now it's $4 is in the total pot, including my 3 that I put out there. And then the next guy goes and puts in 1,000, and that's like all my money. It's like so what I'm doing is I'm assessing, like, okay, let's just say I had pocket aces, okay? Like the very best hand possible. My aces right now stand, like if you consider it, they are the absolute best hand to start with in poker. And so a lot of people would say, well, I have the best hand, I'm all in, I cannot fold this. But you have to look at what you're playing for. It's like right now I have put in $3, and this guy just went over the top and put in $1,000. So what he's doing is he's trying to get me to put in $997 more. And right now what he's looking at, he shoves all his money in. What I'm looking at is the risk assessment is I currently have $3 in, and the whole pot is worth $4 before he went and shoved all his stack in there. And pocket aces only actually win when it comes to like a showdown of hands where I reveal my cards, you reveal your cards, only win 55% of the time. So I have a 45% chance to lose my rent money. Do I do it? And the answer is, in every single case, no, I do not. Because the risk of losing big, like a catastrophic loss, is very high. I have a 45% chance for a catastrophic loss, 55% chance for, I make a good winning. But that is the type of decision that is a fool's decision. So I would fold even pocket aces, and I would look at that player and say, I am going to be careful with that player. So instead of if I had pocket aces next time and I bet and he just goes all in again, it's like, well, I guess I'm just going to continue to fold. But there's going to come a time where where I go in and he does not do that. He puts, he matches my bet or whatever. And then we get to see the first 3 cards that come out. And now I know I've got this guy. I have this guy. And so I bet he gets crazy. Now, when you see the first, let's just say I now have pocket aces again. and the flop, or they call it the flop, the first 3 cards after the initial round of betting, let's just say the same example, there's $1 in the pot, I raise to $3, and then he calls my $3. Okay, so now there's $7 in the pot, but I have pocket aces. What happens is you burn 1 card and flip 3, so I get to see 3 cards, and let's just say it comes ace, ace, 5. I now have 4 aces total, and then this guy shoves all his $1,000 in, and he goes all in. I will always call that. There's just no possibility that I won't. In fact, even if there's just a single ace, I would do the exact same thing, because now I know that the odds are so heavily in my favor. The only thing that this guy can do is beat me with like a royal flush, which is so ridiculously low, and possibly impossible. You have like the very best hand. It's called, you have the nuts. You've got the very best hand possible, given the 5
That's
cards.
really wrong, Mr. Bond. Takes out a gun.
Yeah. So that could always happen. You always have to assess your opponent, see how mentally unstable they are, and so anyway, I think that
Well, it's the same principle applies to driving, right? You probably don't have it there in Texas with your massive roads and massive trucks, but here in little old Ireland, you have very narrow roads. You sometimes get stuck behind tractors if you're driving in the country, and they're bendy roads, and the temptation is going so slow. Looks like there's nothing coming. Can't really see around the corner. I might overtake, but there's always a possibility there's a incoming car, and you just don't take those risks. You just have to patiently sit behind a tractor, move very slowly and be very patient. But it's better to be delayed than dead. So
right, yeah,
late than never.
Or even just your car wrecked. It's like, oh, this is like traumatic to my daily life, right? And so the risk analysis, I think, is so important for somebody that's going to crowdfunding. You want to put yourself in the best possible position to succeed. So going back to poker for one last analogy, let's say we're playing a tournament now and we're at the final table and you go all in. You just, before we see any of the cards, I have pocket aces again, you go all in, and I have
It's rigged, man.
I know, right? So this always happens for me, but you go all in, and I've got the same exact hand, so I've got the best possible chance to win. However, it's the exact same situation where you pushed everything in. So I stand to make a lot of money if I win this tournament, and I stand to, if I lose all my chips, then I lose. But let's say I have, $1,000 behind me, and you have $500 behind you, and you go all in. If I were to call you, I have a better chance to win. And if I happen to lose, I don't lose everything, but you do. So you're likely, shoving everything so that you can potentially get back in the game or something like that. And my maximum risk now, I'm still in the game if I lose. Like if the very worst situation happens, I'm fine. I'm gonna be fine. So in that case, I shove every time, right? And so that's kind of applying this to business. You really want to be in a position where if you lose the maximum possible, you're going to be fine. And that happens with proper planning and, solid implementation, proper building of your email list and looking ahead and assessing risks. So I don't know if you guys want to comment on any of that before we move into like how to properly plan is, I guess, where I
imagine it comes into your savings, right? Because the only way that you can have the kind of that backup if you've got set something aside. So with Deliverance, I'm sure you probably set something aside for contingencies. Would you know, maybe rough balling, what percentage of your funding amount was set aside for emergencies of some sort?
Yeah, so actually, the first campaign we ended up making about $1.5 million total revenue, minus all of our expenses and things like that. We probably came out about maybe $300,000 or $400,000 ahead, and I used that money to invest into a team that is working on the next Deliverance game, marketing for Deliverance, the expansion, development of art and other things that need doing for this next very big box game. And I think I actually did pay myself a little bit. You know, I pocketed a little bit of that money, and I made sure all my credit cards were paid off, and that was cool. But a lot of that money we ended up saving for the purpose of making sure that I could have a team that worked for me for like a so that they could have job security, basically. So, you know, when things happen, it's like, oh, well, it doesn't mean that I have to say goodbye to my artist or I have to say goodbye to my game developer. And that I think is a really, really important thing for the team. We also decided to do some free content for backers of the game every single quarter. And so that's something that we produce. And so we're kind of investing into our fans. We're investing into the you know, the infrastructure for other games, and we're trying to do games right and get them done quicker because we have a greater team and, you know, more resources and whatnot. So yeah, so there came this opportunity where I was able to, you know, pay. So our shipping estimate for the US is about $100,000. So we have to pay $100,000 to do last mile shipping to the US, and just over probably 100K, and including all our fees. And Bridge actually in December was like, hey, anybody who wants to prepay a little early, we'll give you a bump on, you know, we'll give you basically a percentage of the amount that you prepay as pick and pack fees that are, you know, that are compensated. And so I ended up making about $15,000 on that money by just prepaying Bridge. And so that was a risk that I took. And I thought, what if Bridge goes out of business? I lose $100,000. That's a big deal. But then I look at my risk and assess my risk. Well, the upside is that I gain $15,000, and the risk is that I lose 100, right? And so, so 15% is the upside, and then 100% loss is the downside. And I assess the risk. I'm like, this company is stable. They're smart. They're fulfilling lots of great campaigns. They did a great job for my first campaign. They did a great job for all my Amazon sales. There were never any problems. We always had, you know, the business owner is like very responsive, and they look like they're in a healthy financial position. So I went ahead and did it. And I think that we're going to end up a big winner from that. But, you know, there's always a possibility of loss. So if we were to lose $100,000, could we still fulfill the campaign? The answer is yes, we could. And that's because we saved and we made sure to have enough behind us that wouldn't be a catastrophic ending to the campaign. You know, it's always something that's like, I just don't want to, you know, ask for more money from my backers. I don't want to ask for more money from my parents or from my friends and family to try to, you know, make up a loss because I was an idiot and made bad business decisions and poorly managed myself. And so that's, you know, that was something that I really kind of thought through, and move forward with after much consideration and prayer and all that. So there's an example of, I guess.
You know, that you were mentioning a few key factors that went into kind of just the foundation of results in general. You've got, you know, I know Sean would disagree with the term, but you've got so-called luck, you've got preparedness, and then, you know, you have opportunity, and if you're willing to seize that, obviously you have your choice involved. And then another thing that you guys that's kind of cool that you're talking about is really positioning. Like, what is your position going into the midst of whether it's like a storm or, you know, a windfall or whatever it is? Because your position is going to your innate position when something happens is going to dictate a lot of what you can work with. Like you're talking about, you know, having a day job and not just quitting your day job and making kind of foolish, you know, I'm all in on the pot, you know, without seeing the flop decisions, and then just hoping that it all goes well and being surprised when it doesn't. You know, so some people, obviously it's just like their lot in life, like you had rich parents and they're willing to invest into, your entrepreneurial endeavors, or, maybe you're just working your butt off to put a nest egg aside for, your passion project. Um, but yeah, I think that it's really cool to consider all these facets, and then just weigh your risks, and determine what's the what if crowdfunding is even right for you. There are other avenues, and I think that it is a main avenue. I think that what we were saying, even in the height of the tariff situation, held true, that crowdfunding would have been one of the kind of prevailers if they were to persist at a really high rate, just because it's a direct sales channel versus having distribution that gets cut several times into on the profit margins, where they're highly sensitive to those changes, even on a smaller percentage scale. Um, and so, yeah, I think that it's important to just assess, like you're saying, before you get deep into these things, because as designers, we're people that are really excited and enthusiastic about something that we had an idea for. You wake up at 2 a.m. and you grab your journal that's sitting next to your bed and the pen, and you're just like jotting stuff down in like this endless like stream of thought, and then you're like, wow, I've got the framework for my new game, and you just start to see it as being like on the table and everybody's playing it, and it had a successful Kickstarter. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Slow down. Like, it's not the Wild West of Kickstarter anymore, where you just brought that journal and took a screenshot and posted it online, and funds came streaming in. And, you didn't really have to have too much besides a vision to, get some funding. It's like you've got massive competition now of really highly polished, almost AAA-esque, entities in the space now that you're competing with, and people have come to expect that level of polish and of presentation and preparedness and development. And so it's like, you've got to assess if you're up to that, if you're going to be able to pull that off. And then, yeah, like, listen to our podcasts and other resources that are out there for free first. That's a way to kind of prevent having to take a big initial investment, because there are a lot of good free resources. And equip yourself and see. You'll also have a better idea of the scope of what you're getting into, and you'll have the skills to do it if you still decide to do it.
Yeah. I think also one thing that we really need to address is that the metrics of success that you use, maybe some people a lot of people that come into crowdfunding thinking the primary metric of success is the amount of money that I make, the funding, right? The amount of backers and funding. And that's true for the Kickstarter campaign. Afterward, when your game releases, the metric of success is how much people enjoyed your game, how many people actually played it, the longevity of your game. Like, you could have like a one-shot wonder that just makes a bunch of money that nobody plays. And in that case, it won't be something that's easy to sell afterward. If just nobody talks about it, if it's not something that people actually get to the table, it's something that you lose. If that happens, the loss is a delayed loss. So you make a lot of money, and I get the game and I can't make heads or tails of the rule book. It's like, I'm not going to advocate for that game. I'm not going to be excited to back your next project as a creator. I'm going to think you're lazy, as just a backer of games and a player of games. I'm like, I value people that took the time to dial in their rule book, to get it right, to play test it, to work out problems, and really develop a game system that is fun and engaging, that I want to explore again and again. And I think that's one, with Deliverance, that was one area that we really won a lot of fans over with the first go. And it was frustratingly slow. Like, the development of Deliverance was like 7 years from the time that I started it to the time that I actually got it into people's hands. There were a lot of reasons for that. One being that I wasn't a skilled designer. There were a lot of problems. I had a great idea and very poor implementation. But instead of saying this game, and I remember actually one fan, they said, I would have bought this game like 2 years ago. I would have bought the version that I played 2 years ago, but the version that you made now is just better. And I felt like it was important to get it right. If I saw that there were clear problems with the game, I knew I could not ship the game with a problem that I've identified. Like, I know there's a problem with this or whatever. And still, even today, Deliverance is not perfect. It got really high ratings and a lot of people played it. And we had a second Kickstarter that was very successful because people really liked it. They came back and they backed it and they were like, I'm excited for the next game and so on. But I think that a lot of people, and we're seeing this in the games that they release one after the other, a lot of people tend to like go really slow when they're like, I need to nail these targets. I need to nail this funding goal. It's really important to me that I get the Kickstarter campaign right, and it's important to me that I have all my gifts and my explanation of how the game works and the what's in the box and the gameplay video and other things. I need all of those elements, and they're listening to our podcast and like, yes, I need to do all those things, all the hygiene factors and all the virtuous cycle and everything, right? And then they make a crappy rule book and their game sucks. And that's it. It's like, well, I think you have to really think in on multiple different levels. I'm speaking crassly, but I guess I'm passionate about that. You have to think on multiple different levels. You have to have a solid implementation. You can't just present the idea. You have to have a solid implementation of the idea if you want it to take off. And I think that a lot of creators will make something that they're passionate about, but they don't take the time in the areas that will make the experience a delight for the end user. And that's a huge problem. A good rule book solves a lot of problems, like Deliverance, one area of failure, I would say, that I think I wish I had the skill to have avoided this, but in our skirmish mode, like when you play, it's just like sit down, it's a one-shot version of Deliverance where you play 2 battles, second battle culminating in like a final boss fight. And there's this break in between the 2 battles where it's like, okay, you finished the first battle. Now we're going to gear up for the second battle. So set the second one up. And now you stay in the same spaces that you were in before for your characters, but you're going to add on to the map. And now here's the other half with all the bosses. People did not like that they had to like pause the game and do more setup for the second battle and then resume the game. They were like, well, there's this like immersion like break that's happening. And I'd never really received that feedback until, we play tested it like, 2,000 times before we released it. And we really dialed in the rule book and everything. And there were some people that were like, I don't like that. And what they did was they made their own mode of play. They're like, this is called onslaught mode. And in round 4, the next the next demons just start showing up and whatever. And it's like, that's really smart. And that's what they did. They had this way of solving that problem for themselves. And I don't know, maybe that's like 5% of people or less, but the game still has like an 8.5. It's on BGG, and everybody really likes it, and it's a really engaged groups and other things. But I think that the rule book being generally pretty smooth and easy to understand made it easy for gamers to modify the one section they didn't like or whatever, versus just say this game's unplayable, and I think that's like the worst nightmare. The thing that you put all this time, effort, and energy into ends up being not appreciated at the end of the day. It's fine if it has imperfections, like Deliverance obviously does, but it is something that the solid work ahead of time really really helped, and that implementation. I think sometimes you just need to take time to do this, and if you like, for me, I had a bunch of kids, I had a full-time job, I have this passion project on the side. I wish I could devote 40 hours a week to it, but given the limited time that I have to devote to this, how can I make the greatest amount of progress in the areas of the most meaning, of the greatest impact, So then we got a little lucky because people liked the idea, people liked the game and so on. So, but I felt we had a great idea and we were prepared to deliver on people's expectations, right?
So another thing you guys were talking about previously was not only being prepared for things that might just come up that go awry, because that's always going to be a factor. We saw that, in the pandemic, and we saw that now with the recent 145% tariffs thing. And then you were also talking about the flip side about how there's spontaneous good things that can happen, or the storm lets up and it's not it's still drizzling, but it's not a hurricane anymore. So I guess, did you want to transition into what the news said about that, like with the storm letting up?
Sure. So yeah, this the whole tariff thing. I we want to report on important news that impacts you, and tariffs are a big, very big element in the news. And I mean, our podcast, we probably had, we had hundreds of more downloads just on our tariff episodes than normal. And there were a lot of people online. Like, if you're listening to online chatter, there are a lot of people that are just like Chicken Little and the sky is falling. And I don't use that example carelessly. I think there are a lot of people that, when, regardless of political affiliation, they don't have skin in the game as far as like being a business owner, being a crowdfunding person that is actually making something. They have, everybody has an opinion, and there are a lot of people that are like, this is the worst thing ever, and all the companies are going to go out of business and whatever. These things that they're saying are not grounded in fiction or anything. They're not like completely preposterous, and how could you even say something like that? You're being ridiculous. But at the same token, they are not. It's like they forgot everything that happened before and don't think anything else will ever happen after. It's like there's no difference. This is our world now. We're stuck with 145% tariffs for long enough for all the companies to go out of business, and the Trump is a bad guy and whatever. And I think that these are just this is not the way that you need to, like, the mindset that you need to have as a business owner, as a crowdfunder, is not like, can I do it or can't I do it? The question is, how can I do it? What are the steps that I need to take in order to, like, the actionable steps? So you need to stop thinking about, oh, the tariffs are awful, and I'm mad and complain and despair and whatnot. There are a lot of people that lost a lot of sleep. And so you have to, in the midst of crisis, you have to say, what can I do to put myself in the best possible position given the circumstances? So you're, back to the poker analogy, you're in for a bunch of chips. You've got half of the amount of chips that you have in the pot, and now you've been raised a bunch of money, and you're like, well, now what do I do? There are meaningful decisions to make. Poker is a very binary system. Do you bet or do you fold or whatever? But I guess it's a trinary: bet, fold, or call. And the fish call, don't call. So you really want to make sure that you're not like despairing. You want to make sure that instead you're planning. So you have to focus on what you can control. There are things outside of your control, and this is something that I do, that I advise all of our clients, like in all elements of business work. Where we work for small businesses, we do SEO marketing. We help people get to the top of Google. So we work with a lot of small business owners, plumbers, and preschools, and chiropractors, and you name it. And then on this side, we work with a bunch of product-based businesses. And it's really, really important to focus on what you can control. The first thing that you can control is when you ship your product. If you ship your product with, and think about, like, what will capsize you. For me, if I shipped my product to the US after April 9th, when the 145% tariffs were in, I'm done. Like you're dead. Because I can't afford to pay that bill, and keep the lights on. So I have to hold, if you've manufactured, you find a warehousing and you store that, and you wait. So buy yourself time is really, really important. And look at the past, because there are indicators in what is going on around you, like in the present and in the recent past, like week before, 2 weeks before. Also, Trump's first administration and how it went with China and everything. I talked about, we had like 4 months of crazy instability with China and the threat of tariffs on various stages of products, and then they came to a deal. They came to a deal after a couple of months, and so I started sounding the kind of the similar talk with Trump and China, and then it happened a little bit differently this time, but the overarching theme was, and I guess the results are kind of still the same. The timeline is very similar to when it seems like things are being resolved, and so I think that every smart business owner would look and say, okay, there's instability now. I'm going to protect myself from damage now, and then also plan for when I expect things to change. And I think that that's the major thing that a lot of people just stopped doing. They stopped looking into the future and forecasting. And that was something that if you forecast properly, you can lead your people properly, the people in Kickstarter updates and other things like that. Give them an update that doesn't seem completely doom and gloom. If all you're thinking about is how this is terrible and is the end of all things, then your backers are going to lose faith and in you. They're not going to lose faith in Donald Trump or whatever. They're going to lose faith in you as the leader that is leading the procession and is in control of their money. And they're going to ask for refunds and other things like that. So find a way through. Like, that's your job. You're the one at the helm. And if you can't find a way through, then you are not, you have not managed well enough. A lot of the time there are factors that were in your control that you didn't properly exercise agency over, and then you get to this position where you made a bad choice, or maybe you have to pay 30% more in tariffs, and that's too much. So I think that for everybody, I guess I don't want it to be like a "and I told you so" moment. I think that plenty of people could argue with me about this, and there's not pure stability right now, even with tariffs. But now we're at 30%. I expect that we will be down to 20, and that's where we're going to call it. So China will tariff us at 10%, and we'll tariff them at 20, and eventually it'll go down to 10, and that's probably where it will sit. And so, what do you think, Sean? You had some thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, the whole environment seems to be changing really, really rapidly. So even though it's gone down now, it could jump back up, because it's like, gotcha. I don't know. Like, anything could happen at this moment. So I think at this time, I think you should still pump the brakes and sort of be patient and wait. It's a positive sign. It's great, but it could change tomorrow before we know. So I think you've sort of seen this. I think it's somewhat unclear what Trump's agenda is. Clearly, it's not to bring manufacturing back to the US, because it's not really feasible. So there's something else happening here, and there's probably factors at play that no one understands, because you just simply don't have the information. These people are accessing, probably classified documents that we don't even have knowledge to. So that's probably impacting their decision space. So I would still probably caution people to step slowly, as we were talking about this, baby steps, step slowly if possible. And then one thing we talk about as well in terms of savings is that when you have savings, when opportunities do arise, you can capitalize on them. And as you said with the bridge, that an opportunity, like, you couldn't plan for that, but because you had something stored away, you could actually then capitalize on that. And it actually has made you quite a sizable sum just from being patient and not going and buying, a new car or something with those funds. So I think that's what's important to keep in mind, is patience, moving slowly, being diligent, and biding your time, waiting for the right time to strike. Kind of like Gandalf, never late or early, just arrives precisely when you need to. It's like when he comes back at Helm's Deep and saves Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas. It's like the right time. They're just about to be overrun, and suddenly he appears and saves them. So I think it's the same in business in a lot of ways. If you've got that kind of contingency stored up, then you are able to capitalize on those opportunities when they arise.
Absolutely. So it's a lot of stuff, in regard to tariffs and whatnot. One last point I want to make is for myself. So this is something that I'm doing. We're giving we're doing a digital art pack for our fans and giving them the ability to purchase it. So this is something I'm planning. We're giving them the ability to purchase it for any amount or just have it for free, but the suggested purchase is going to be like $10. And we're billing this specifically as this will help us with tariffs. So if you want to help us with the tariff costs, this is how you do that. So whether or not you actually care about the art pack, you might care about helping us with tariffs. And this is a voluntary way to help to give people that are passionate fans for your company a positive way to engage with you. So they want to give you their support, right? They backed your project. They're talking in communities with you and that kind of thing, and they appreciate you and what you're doing for them, and they appreciate kind of the stuff that you're enduring on the journey. They would pay you money for things of value. And one thing of value that you may not, I guess, see is valuable is the opportunity to help you. So your fans find value in helping you. So if you have, if you can give value in exchange for help, that's just delights people. So if you're like, I need more money, that is frustrating. But if you give people an opportunity to voluntarily give more money for a cause, then, even with the promise of delivery, the voluntary opportunity to give money, that's actually a positive thing. It's not a negative. It's not like, oh, they're trying to take all my money. But then if you, in addition to that, offer value, which is for us just a free digital art pack we're making anyway, and it's going to be really cool. You can have cell phone backgrounds, desktop backgrounds, stuff like that. You're going to be delighted because there's already value in helping, because I want to, because out of the goodness of my heart, I have the opportunity to help. It feels good, and there's value in me giving a little bit of money to help. Like a homeless person, if somebody has their hand out looking for money so they can buy their next meal, it actually feels good to help that person or to buy them a cheeseburger or something like that. Like there are reasons that you would just do that, because helping people feels good. But then you offer extra value and it delights. It's like way more value than I expected by just helping. And so that's something that I would encourage you to consider, is like, that you don't have to say like, we'll pay for half and you pay for half. That's an option, of course. A lot of companies are doing that. I think that's a fair way to split. But if you give people the ability to help, then I think you will also end up ahead. So think about different options about what works for you, but you're never stuck. There's never, if you feel stuck, there are always ways forward. You just have to, I guess, planning really helps you avoid getting stuck. So I guess that's enough for this episode. Hopefully you guys found it valuable. It's just really trying to talk and broach the topic of something that really, really matters and is very significant to a lot of people, trying to apply some firsthand experience and also perspective. Hope you guys found it valuable. I'll have Robot Richard send us on out.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.
Hey, crowdfunding nerds, it's Andrew Lowen, and I wanted to introduce you guys to the Crowdfunding Nerds Academy. If you don't know, we have a do-it-yourself course system that will teach you how to build, excite, and prepare a crowd to fund you on your launch day, and that is our goal. I have used these systems to help raise over $30 million for tabletop campaigns, over 200 tabletop crowdfunding campaigns since 2019. I've generated over $100 million through e-commerce sales using these processes. These courses teach you how to replicate our results. They're made for the small creator. Over 150 of those people were first-time creators. These courses contain hundreds of hours of podcast discussions and tons of details that are almost impossible to find on the internet. And they have been distilled into concentrated courses that you can absorb quickly. They are designed to generate results. We hold nothing back. Visit crowdfundingnerds.com/academy to learn more, or just Google search Crowdfunding Nerds Academy.